the CTE program and coordinating the classes there. So I wanted to come in and share a little bit about resume basics. And as we have a job fair tomorrow, and as you're perhaps looking into entering the workforce or just updating your resume, I'm here to share a couple of tips on how to build up your resume. So thanks, Marcy, and for hosting. And if there's any questions along the way, please let us know and I'll go ahead and stop. So today's workshop, we're just gonna look at purposes and uses of a resume. So what is a resume? There's a couple of different ways to format a resume. There's different types depending on your experience and things like that. I'll go into it a little bit. There are essential sections on a resume. A resume must have some basic information that it has to be there. I'll go over some formatting tips and just the finished product. What should it look like? So here we go. Some of you might have heard of resume already and might have one or might not have one. So what is the purpose of a resume? Right off the bat, the resume is like the first impression that you're giving a potential employer. It's the main purpose of it is just so that you go from applying to a job to actually getting an interview. So that is what you're trying to do with a resume. Show the employer that they should give you a chance to consider you for the job that they're looking to hire for. So it's a way for you to stand out from other people. But really important to know that most employers or most people reviewing resumes, they take about 10 seconds to scan your resume. So resumes in that sense are really important because people will make a snapshot judgment just based on a quick look at it. And even some companies use computer programs to automatically scan it. So sometimes it's not even a person scanning your resume, it's a system. So so a resume becomes more important the higher level job you're trying to apply. A lot of companies that if you're looking at entry level jobs, a lot of companies will ask the same information that you would typically have on a resume to go straight into the job application. So it's a good idea to have the information that you would normally have on a resume, even when you're doing an entry level position, because chances are that the application itself will ask you about your employment history and to give a little bit of information on what you do there. And so it matches up. So just to recap, the higher level job you are applying for, the more need for a resume. So in general, what are some tips for your resume? It has to be easy to read. So use a format that is professional, that is clean, that is not too busy. You want to keep your resume the shortest possible. It can't be like 3 or 4 pages long, because then that's, you know, people again take like 10 seconds to look at it, right? So it's important to have it well written, and concise. So free of grammatical errors, no punctuation. Try and say things with the least possible amount of words. The other thing is to make sure that it's accurate and that it's professional. So whatever it is that you're putting in there, you have to put it in a language that is a little bit more elevated, and highlight the things that make you stand out or different from other people applying. So you want to put your accomplishments and you want to give information to back it up. Okay, so keep that in mind as you're building a resume. as well as organizing it in a way that, again, it's easy to read. So use bullet points, bold, or different like indentations, meaning like starting those sentences in different spaces and making it consistent so that you can clearly see sections of the resume spread out. One thing that is important is that a resume, again, you have use the font that is easy to read. So stick with fonts like Arial and Times New Roman. You don't want script letters that are in cursive. So keep it simple and just proofread and have other people proofread it. Sometimes when we have something and we think it's perfect and then someone else notices something. So it's important to have someone else look at it too. Okay, so as far as formats, there's different ways of organizing the information on a resume. More commonly, you see chronological. That means that your work experience, whatever jobs you've had in the past, are organized by time, the most current at the top and the least current at the bottom. So your newest job and your oldest job. And so that's the most traditional, that's the most common, but that is also something that this is a good format if you have lots of work experience, or if you've kept a job consistently and there's no gaps in employment, not too big of a gap. Some gaps, it's okay, but let's say you haven't worked for 5 or 10 years, you don't necessarily want to go in chronological order. So functional order is when you focus on your skills. Let's say there's something that you know how to do, and so you're going to focus on that kind of skill and talk about what you do or what you know how to do there, and do a list of employers like at the very end. So it's different kinds of format, and this is a better suit if you don't have work experience, or if you feel like maybe your work experience, the jobs that you've had don't necessarily match up with the job that you're trying to have. So here you're looking at, okay, what skills or what things do I know how to do that might apply to my job, or if you have little work experience. So let's take a look at some samples, and then in the chat, you tell me whether you think it's a chronological or a functional. And so I'm going to give you 4 examples. So here's the first one. So keep in mind, chronological, you're looking at the work experience, and it's in order of time. It's most recent or newest to oldest. The other one is more functional. So here we go, example number 1. I know it's maybe a little fussy, but I think you can still tell. So in the chat, what do you think? Chronological or functional? Okay, I see someone typed in chronological. Thank you, very good. So this is a chronological resume. Very good. This is a resume. If you notice, a professional experience is listed by job, and there's a job one after the other, and they're talking about that job. Okay, so let's take a look at the next one. This one looks busy, but what type of resume is it? Chronological or functional? Okay, I see the first response there. Very good. So this is a functional resume. So notice how they're not talking about the job and from what time to what time they had it. They're talking about the type of experience they have. And so this is definitely a functional. Okay, let's take a look at the next one. Okay, what do you think this one is? This is another example. Functional or chronological? Okay, I see some responses there. This is definitely a functional resume. So again, this is highlighting the kind of experience someone has and what they've done to demonstrate they have that experience, but not necessarily chronologically listing the jobs. So let's take a look at the last example here. And this is the last one. So is this functional or chronological? I see the first response in there. Very good. So this is chronological order. So when you're building your own resume, think about everybody's going to have something slightly different. So you want to think about the kind of resume in general that will better suit what you have. So if you have lots of experience and you've kind of had several jobs that don't have breaks in between, or the time break is very little, then maybe you want to talk about format your resume in a way that you're talking about each job and what you did in each job chronologically. But if you don't have that much experience and you're just kind of talking about general, like what your abilities are, then you want to put it in functional format. So thanks for participating in that. So think about your own experience and figure out whether you would go more towards one way or the other. So that's the first an important step in figuring out how to do your resume. But now let's look at the resume sections. So some resumes will have more information than others, but at the very minimum, there's 5 sections that everybody needs to have. So the first section is your personal and contact information. That is usually at the top. And I'll go into give you a little bit of tips on each one. You have to have a targeted introduction. There has to be a section where you talk about your work experience or any of the experience that is relevant to the job, any education or training, and any other skills that you might have. So at the very minimum, you want to make sure that you have these 5 sections in your resume. Let's take a look at the first one. So your contact information, this is where you list your name, and you want to make sure that your name stands out, that you make it in either a bold font, or that you make it at least 2 font sizes larger than the rest of the information there. This is where you put your contact phone number. You want to put the best phone number that they can reach you. And super important, I know that number that you're going to list for resumes or for even job applications, make sure that your voicemail sounds professional. You don't want an employer calling you back and having a voicemail that says, "What's up?" or "You know what to do," kind of thing. I've heard a lot of those. So make sure that when you are applying for jobs, take a look at, go back to your voicemail and make sure that sounds professional. Because if you have anybody contacting and you have something that is not professional sounding, that's an impression on the employer. So your phone number, make sure it's one that they can get a hold of you. Number 2, make sure your voicemail sounds professional. Another tip here is sometimes we post our resume, or we have to upload it or put it somewhere where it might be public. And so know that you don't necessarily have to put your full address. It's okay to just put the city and the state you live in. So that if you are concerned with privacy, or you're sharing your resume somewhere where other people might view it, you don't necessarily have to put your full address. So city and state will do just fine. And the last thing here is your email address may be something that you created a long time ago, and it might be cute, or it might have some the first part of your email address has to be something that is not too cutesy or not too unprofessional. Make sure that you revise that email address into something that employers can contact and maybe associate with you, and not necessarily some just random name that might not sound too professional. Okay, questions? All right, so I'm going to move on to the next section, and this is a very important section. This usually follows the top of the resume. And so here, what you really want to do is, again, this is a part where most of the time, if a person is scanning or reading through your resume, they're going to get through the top section of where it says your name and then this section in 10 seconds, right? So there's 3 ways of doing this section. And you can, and depending on your personal experience, then you're going to choose the best one for you. So the more experience you have, the more information you can put in here. The less experience you have, you should stick to the shorter version of this introduction. The main thing you want to do for this section is to make sure that you look at the job description and look at what your qualifications are and see, okay, what is relevant? I want to make it targeted. That's what targeted means, to or tailored or relevant as much as possible to what I'm applying for. So let's take a look at these 3 ways of doing your introduction. So highlights of qualification is one way in which you can do your resume introduction. This is for someone that has a lot of experience, a lot of technical background, a lot of soft skills or just related experience. And so it's basically a summary of your qualifications that you have here, but it's very long. So here's like one example of someone that could do a highlights of qualifications. Now, the next version is a shorter version. It's called an objective. And so here you're basically just listing your like top qualities and saying like in which way you think it would work for this position. And so this is usually if you have little experience or if you're switching, you're trying to show how your experience is relevant to the job you're applying for, because maybe the experience or the places you've worked for are not necessarily kind of the same as where you're applying to. This is a better option. So you want to just keep it to like a sentence, a really long sentence perhaps, but you're listing the position that you're going for, you're listing how your top qualities and how they relate to this position. Okay, and then the last one is a little in between. So it's just it's a summary or a profile, sometimes they're called, but this one is a little longer version of, it's instead of bullet points, you're just writing a quick summary of your experience and what you've done in the past. So here's an example of a summary. Blends academic training in social work with 3 years of experience working with diverse clientele. And so this is like a quick summary of what they've done, right? They're telling us how many years they have, where their training is, and then they're giving us qualities: adept at interviewing, report writing, and problem solving. So they're keeping it to what they're really good at, and then some soft skills: professional, collaborative, and committed. So you definitely want to do some soul searching and figure out what you're really good at. So here's a little practice exercise. In the interest of time, if you can take a picture of this section and then fill in the blanks, and this is going to give you something that you can think about and write for that top section of your resume. So you really want to look at what your skills are, what your personal qualities are, what you have expertise in, what qualifications you might have, or what kind of occupation, and then try and work with this scheme or with this so that you can write up your little summary for the top part. And it's a good start. Okay, so I'm going to move on to, did everybody get a picture of that perhaps? Okay, I'm going to move on to the work experience. So again, work experience, the way you write it, it's going to depend on whether you have a chronological or a functional, right? You want to, in your work experience, if you're doing chronological order, again, you're going to put your most recent and your newest job or what you have now and your oldest job at the very bottom. If you have a lot of experience, you want to cut it down to just make the most relevant or the most related work, and don't go back more than 10 years. If you are going back more than 10 years, that's like too far back. You want to keep it close to where we are now. So the information that you have to put in there, regardless of what order, is like the position you had or the job title, the name of the company, the location of where you were working, and then when you were working. So look at, you don't have to know the exact day that you started and the exact day that you left the company, but you do have to have an idea, March of 2015 to June of 2020 or something like that. So have an idea and make sure that you have that information. Now, I mentioned again, if you are applying for an entry-level job, and this is information that they're going to ask in your job application. So it's a good idea to go through this exercise of having a list of all the places you've worked, the company name, the dates, the times, all of that, and then make a list of what did you do there and what are some of the responsibilities that you had. Whether you're putting it directly into a job application or whether you're putting it into a resume. So some of the way in which you write your experience, if you're doing, you want to stick to shorter descriptions. You don't want to put like super long descriptions. So 5 bullet points is good. You want to prioritize what you did. The most relevant work to the job that you're applying for goes on the top. The least relevant type of duty that you had at that job goes at the bottom. So look at the order in which you're even listing your information. And then as you're writing or as you're putting together the information on what you did there, it's important to include a power verb. So I'll go a little bit into that, but make sure if it's something that you did that you're not doing now, you put it in past tense. You write it in past tense. If you're doing it now, you're in that job, then you put it in present tense. Wherever possible, make sure you include numbers or quantity of like what you're doing, and that it's something that you can measure. It gives a clear picture. And then a tip to writing that information is you want to think about what did you do? What was the situation? What did you do? And then what was the result? What was the accomplishment? So they're called accomplishment statements. So let's look at, like, this is an experience, a bullet point under your work experience. So an action verb is something like reorganize, facilitated, manage, trained, produce, things like that. And so if you're starting your description, you want to start it with a verb. You want to say, what did you do? And notice how these examples have numbers. And we want to look at then what happened or what was the accomplishment. I see a question. So I'm going to go back to, what if you haven't worked in 10 years? So if you haven't worked in 10 years, if you have gaps in work, you want to put your, you want to definitely write your resume in a functional order. So even though you haven't worked in a long time, you still have some skills and some work experience. So you're going to highlight that information And then at the bottom, you're just going to list where you've worked. But you want to focus on what you did and what you accomplished, and not necessarily put the work in chronological order, because the first thing that someone's going to see is, oh my gosh, this is like from 10 years ago. So you just shift the order and focus on your qualities and what you know how to do. Hope that answers your question. Okay, so let's take a look at this. I'm going to read the first example. Reorganize the filling system for over 10,000 tax documents. So right there, knowing the number of tax documents gives you like, wow, that's a lot. They did a lot. Using a simplified color coding system. And then what happens? Save time for administrative staff at the end of every month. So you want to focus on having information on what did you do, how did you do it, and what was the outcome. Here's another example. Demonstrated ability to successfully build relationship with customers by greeting them warmly, listening carefully to clarify needs, and recommending products. So this is another way of keeping the same writing. Now, here's a list of some words or power words that you can use based on like the soft skill that you have. And they can help you kind of come up with how to say what you did at a job. So if you want to take a picture of this, or if someone needs a packet to fill out this information, I can also provide that. Okay. Is it okay if I move from here? Can I get thumbs up? Or we're still looking at this section? All right, so I'm going to move on to some examples of, again, using a power verb, an action, and then some accomplishment. I see some in the chat. Okay, so here's an example. Here's some examples. Let's see. I'm going to start from this last one here. Exceeded annual sales quota consistently by an average of 15% for 3 years. And then how did you do that? By initiating a system of follow-up contracts with satisfied customers. So there's other employee of the month for 3 consecutive months. And then they listed the months at the gap. So those are accomplishment statements. So there's a couple of ways in which to write this information. And I want to mention that there's also at the College and Career Center that we have at the Parent Center, we have a software that helps you come up with these sentences. So if you need help in figuring out, oh, how do I save this work experience? Stop by the College and Career Center at the Parent Center, and we have a software there that can help you come up with the information that you need to write down for a resume. Because sometimes it could be kind of hard to think up how to say what we know how to do. And so there's tools that help you do that. So the basic information you need to come with is an understanding of what you did in your job, and then how to say it or how to write it is something that we can help you with. All right, so I'm going to move on to the last section so that I have some time for questions. The section where it's education and training, you want to make sure that you write your degree, whether it's in your country or here. You want to write the most recent degree, and that's what you want to start with. And the information that you want to put in there is the name of the school, when you completed it. So again, maybe not necessarily the exact day, but make sure you put the month and the year. And then any certificates or any degrees or any programs that you have completed could go there. Again, and this is something that could be from your own, you can go, that you can put from your own country. It's okay if that's the most recent thing that you have. And another information that you can include in this section are if you've had any awards, or if you had any leadership positions, like maybe you were in a group and then you were the president of that like club or something like that. And if you had a really good grade, you want to list that there. If you have like an honors mention or something like that, you want to put it in your education and training. So any certificates that you complete at our school, you can also include in your resume. You would put the name of the certification, Corona Norco Adult School, and then the month and year you completed it. And then that would go in your education and training along with anything that you've done before. Make sure that everything you list there follows the same sequence. So if you're putting the name of the schools first, and then the name of the degree, and then the date, follow the same order for everything that you're listing. If you're putting the name of what your certificate or the name of your degree first, then the name of the school, then the year, make sure you follow the same order. Oh, sorry. Okay, the section where we're putting or listing our skills, there are 3 different types of skills. There are general soft skills, and that is like anything that you can use that is not really job specific, that it's something that are just qualities that you can have, and they are called transferable. So if you have like, if you are good with customers, customer service is something that is transferable. If you are good at problem solving, or you are a team player, multitasking. So those are all examples of soft skills that you can list in your skills section. There's technical skills. So this is like computer programs, or like depending on what skill you, what jobs you may have, there might be things that that you learn how to use. Maybe a specific machine or an equipment or a program for what you've studied. And so these are things that you put there. So typically a lot of jobs ask that you're at least aware of how to use a computer. And so one of the things that you want to include there is that you are able to use Microsoft, for example, Microsoft Office Vision, or that you know how to use the internet, for example. Those are things that you would put there. And then lots of people forget to include language skills. So if you speak a different language, anytime that you're applying for a job, it's going to be an assumption that you need to know English. So if you know another language, you want to make sure that you include it in your resume and that you put it there. So you could say fully bilingual in, and then say the language, your native language there. And include that, because that is an additional skill that you have, and that nobody that can set you apart. Okay, questions on the skills section? All right. And the last couple of tips here, again, is just formatting. So once you've kind of put all the information in place, know that a resume, it's a work in progress. And so it's not something that you're going to be able to work on for like 30 minutes and then be done with it. You have to invest a little bit of time and think a lot about what you've done, and think a lot about your skills and what you think are your best qualities, and highlight those in your resume. So sometimes putting together a resume takes more time to brainstorm and to gather the information than to, that's the main part. And that's the main step that you want to focus on. And then at the very end, once you put everything together, you want to look at some formatting, and this is how it looks. You want to make sure that it looks good. Always put the information that is most relevant to what you're applying at the very, very top. Don't put your, the size of the letters matter. So if it's too small, that's not very good. 11.11 size is usually a good size to go with. It's not too small, it's not too big, but stay between 10 and 12. If you're underlining using bold or italics, stick to one. You don't want to use all three of them, because then if everything is kind of accentuated, then nothing's really the main thing that you're looking at. Pick 2 font styles. So if you're changing the type of letter, stick to 2. More than that gets too busy, and again, no cursive. When you're looking at spacing, make sure that if you're using bullets in one section, continue using bullets in the next. If you're putting the date in one side of the document, keep it in the same side. So you want to make everything consistent and make sure that there's the same spacing and the same things. So your finished product, make sure that you're not using personal pronouns like I did da 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 da, because a resume is written in first person. So you need to avoid all of those things. Go back and look at your resume, make sure that there's no I's in there. Check for spelling, grammar, and punctuation. Always ask someone else to read it for you, because they might catch something. Super important to include only true information. Do not lie in your resume, but try and make whatever experience you do have relate to what you're applying for. So that's the main thing. When you are putting together a resume, make sure that it matches the job that that you're applying for. And look at the job description, so that when you're explaining what you're doing, you can use some of the keywords and some of the phrases that are in the job description in your resume, so it matches a little bit better. And do a 15-second test. If someone does, look at it for 15 seconds, and they need to get have someone look at it for 15 seconds, and they need to be able to get the basic information from your resume and make a quick snap judgment on your resume for 15 seconds, in those 15 seconds. So that's all the information I have for you today. I know that I kind of went and cover a lot of things, but let's, I'm gonna give some time now and answer any questions that you may have around resumes and writing a resume. You can type it on the chat, or if you just have a question, you can unmute yourself, and then we can talk about some of the things that you may be wondering about.
So I have a question, for just a general question. When is the best time to work on creating a resume?
So you want to have you want to know anytime is the best time. So you if you're thinking of getting a job, then you want to at least start gathering the basic information. Start thinking about your experience that you've had. And I have a packet. If you guys stop at the College and Career Center and pick up that packet, or I can post it online or share it with your teachers, but basically fill out the general information about where you work. Sometimes when we have to apply for a job and all of a sudden they're asking us for this information, we go into panic mode. So it's always a good idea to just kind of have everything written out in a place. And if you don't have your resume polished or like really well written, it's okay, but at least have the basic information and know your soft skills and know the things that you're really good at, so that if the opportunity presents itself, you can at least have something that you can start working off from. So I would say don't wait until you're applying for a job. the research of yourself, of your job before you're thinking of going into the workplace.
Okay,
So,
thank you. So even if someone's thinking, oh, in the future, then now's a good time to start working on that resume, and because a good resume takes a long time to prepare is what I'm gathering.
yes, so at least do the first part of it, even if you're not going to start working, but you know that sometime later, whether it's in months or maybe next year, it doesn't matter. Like, start writing down the information that on either previous work experience or your skills. And then sometimes too, we forget any volunteer stuff that you do. Sometimes we volunteer in the community, or like at our kids' school, or like at like religious associations or things like that. And so if we do any volunteer work, that's stuff that can go in your resume. So it's always a good idea to write it down and say, what did I do here? So that you never know when you're gonna need it. And sometimes we might forget what we did. So it's even if you're not applying for a job right now, keep a list at least of the information.
Perfect, thank you. And if someone needs help with their resume, is it best for them to email you?
So if someone needs help with the resume, we have, like I said, we have at the College and Career Center, that is that's an office inside the Parent Center on 6th Street in Maine. We have an office there that we have a computer lab that has software that helps you to write up your resume. So if you need help, you can just stop by the Parent Center at the College and Career is open. I'm there on Tuesday mornings from 8:30 to 12:30. And then we have on Wednesdays from 1 to 5 o'clock. We have someone there too that can help you with writing your resume, or at least get you started. But you can always email me too. If you have, let's say you already have a resume and you need some feedback, you can email it to me, and then I can give you some feedback on your resume.
Great, thank you. Does anybody else have any other questions for?
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Erica, is it better to make an appointment, call you first, show up? What works best for the student when they're trying to, gather their paperwork or create this, resume? What would you recommend as far as like, it's okay to show up?
So if it depends on where you're at. If you need to just get started, just show up. If you need, like, you want specific feedback and you're further along, you have your resume, or you have a specific job that you're applying for, and you're looking to make sure that your resume is like fine-tuned, or like the best it could be for that job, then I would say it's better to make an appointment, because that takes a little bit more focus and time. So if you're getting started, just show up. You don't need to make an appointment. But if you already have like a job that you're trying to apply for, and you have some something more concrete, then I would say it's better to make an appointment so that we can really focus on that. And so just call the office. You can call or email me, but it's usually Tuesday mornings is when I'm there. So I can try and make an appointment at a different time if more Tuesday mornings doesn't work for you. So the best thing to do that is to either call the office to have them like and leave a message so that I can reach back to you and come up with a time for you, or you can email me directly and then I can set up that appointment time.
Thank you for that.
Mute. Okay, thank you so much for everything that you presented to us today. We really appreciate your information, and just pretty great stuff about resume writing, and really just if anybody has questions about jobs and career opportunities, Erica Brambila is a great resource for us at the College and Career Center at inside the Parent Center. So please reach out to her. Thank you for being here today. We appreciate you.
Thank you. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you. I'm going to pause or stop our recording.